Hi, I'm Ruthie Bowles, owner of Defy the Status Quo, and you're listening to an episode of the Defiant Business Podcast, your daily dose of business knowledge. So let's go ahead and get into it. I came across an interesting question on Quora, and in addition to answering it, I decided to take it as a topic for the podcast today. So the question was, how much should a freelance writer charge for blog posts? And so this question comes up in a lot of different forms depending on who's asking it. So it could be, how much should I pay for blog posts if you're the client? And if you're the writer, it might be, how much do writers normally charge for a blog post? And I'll be honest with you, bottom line up front, it depends. And I know that that's not the answer that people want to hear, but it's a fact. It depends. There is no standard rate list, and writers have come up with rates based on a variety of factors. When clients ask, it's typically because they don't know. Um, Either they don't know because they've never hired a writer or another type of freelancer. So this really covers like freelancers in general. If you're working with service professionals, their rates vary, right? So I'm speaking from the writer perspective because I'm a writer, but it applies to graphic designers and web designers. There's no standard list, you know. So when clients ask, they typically don't know whether it's a writer or any other type of freelancer. When a freelancer asks, that sort of question, how much should I charge? It's because they don't know, probably. So that's usually a sign of inexperience. And it's not that the writer themselves is inexperienced. It could be that it's a new type of project. So whenever I take on a new project, I don't ask how much do freelancers charge typically when I'm scoping for answers. I'll say, can you share? So if I'm in a Facebook group, I might say, can you share what your typical rate is for X? I'm trying to get an idea of the market. So that's generally a better way to do it. Um, because if you're the freelancer, what if the general rate is not good for you for, different reasons? Um, Freelance services, services of pretty much almost any kind, are not like picking from a menu. I'd like a blog post with the side of SEO. Thanks. That's not how it works. Because if it did, then, blogging is already kind of commoditized as it is. But even if it did work that way, there are too many factors for that to be fair for the variety of freelancers that exist out there. So I mentioned that there are various factors that you have to use when calculating a project rate, and we're going to go into some of those factors. I think knowing this is really important for clients because they can understand that, even if you're on the phone with a freelancer, they can't just tell you exactly what it'll be without your project details. So just saying, oh, I want a blog post, or oh, I want a logo, oh, I want my website redesigned, isn't going to be able to let the freelancer charge you a good rate or quote you an accurate rate. Without more details. So, like if it was a web design project, then maybe the freelancer would want to know how many pages you want, right? Because a 5-page website versus a page or a website that's got 20, obviously that's a different level of effort, and the freelancer would expect to be paid more for their services. So, that makes sense. So, in terms of writing, and this is actually, I think, true if the freelancer specializes in an industry, the first factor I have listed is the topic. So if you want a designer who also writes, then the topic becomes pretty relevant. I think that the industry can be relevant depending on what the standard is. As you know from my business name, Defy the Status Quo, I like to know what the standard is and then flip it. Uh, but never, to the detriment of anything. But flipping the standard can kind of be a way of standing out. But if you want a good website, you still want a good website, but maybe you flip the expectations of what your website will look like. But anyway, topic. A blog post on gardening and a blog post on technology, let's say blockchain, shouldn't cost the same amount. So if I'm I'm a writer and you're like, how much is a blog post on gardening? And I'm like, $75. And they're like, okay, and what about blockchain? I'm like, $75. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to have to do so much more work for a blog post on technology. Either that or I've got a lot of technology experience and I don't have to do as much work, but that doesn't decrease the value comparatively. The amount of information that's out there on gardening, like there's just so much already. So it's low hanging fruit, if you will. And then, so in my case, I also happen to garden, so I already know about the topic. But in terms of technology, even even though there is a lot of information out there, um, it's also more complex. It's harder to understand. And if you want a writer who has experience in those industries, then the rates may go up. But the writer in technology, their rate is still likely going to be higher because there's just less people who specialize in something, especially a particular facet of technology. So the length of a project, so whether that's writing or whether that's design, the length of a project also matters. So if you ask me, hey Ruthie, how much do you charge for blog posts? And I'm like, 500 words, 2,000 words, 3,000? Like, how long do you want this to be? Now, you may not know that for sure. So if you don't know that, say so. I don't know how long it should be. You tell me. Okay. I know that you don't know, but don't just pick a number out of thin air. Like, I haven't written a 500 word blog post in a long time, and that's because they're not particularly valuable for search engine optimization, and they're not always long enough to really cover a topic. Other type of factors that might need to be included are there going to be interviews for this blog post? Is the topic such that the writer needs to interview your subject matter experts? Or maybe we're designing the website. Does the designer need to, speak with other shareholders for this project? Maybe other people on your board or whatever. So that's additional time. Additional services. Are there any ancillary services that are going to be included? When I do blogging, I'll find pictures. If the client wants me to, we'll upload it into the website for them and publish and everything. So we take that off their hands. It's not something they have to worry about, but it is an additional service. But then you always have to consider your writers or your freelancers' experience levels. A new writer, a new freelancer's going to be less expensive, but they're going to make more mistakes. Probably. Maybe they don't know search engine optimization writing very well, and there's other things that they're just not going to know, and so their final project may not be as good as the more experienced writer who's more expensive, but they make less mistakes or they know more about search engine optimization. And the one big thing I think that's real key is a less experienced freelancer typically reverts to order taking. So you tell me, oh, I want a blog post on this. And I say, all right. And I do it exactly the way you tell me to. So I listen to you, right? But the experienced writer, you say, I want a blog post on this and I want it this long. Me now, I'm going to say, well, first of all, that length isn't good for search engine optimization. And second of all, that topic isn't a topic that your customers care about. I did a little keyword research and it's just not one that they care about. So if we do this, you're wasting resources. So you could choose to push on with it if you wanted, but now I've told you. Now it's pretty likely that I wouldn't actually write it because it wouldn't get you the results that you wanted. The sorts of clients I work with, when I tell them, hey, that's not a good idea, they typically listen to me because I'm more experienced than them. So that makes sense. And then the location where your freelancer lives may also come into play. So if you need programming of some kind or whatever, and they live in a country where the exchange rate is such that you can pay them a lot less, but it's still a good rate for them, that's always the key I look for. Even if I'm, taking advantage of currency differences, if the rate is still good for them, then okay. Um, and then I'll just answer the question. Depending on the factors, let's say a 500 word blog post could be anywhere from $10 to 500 or more dollars. So just keep that in mind when you put out what you're looking for. All right. This has been an episode of the Defiant Business Podcast, and I am Ruthie, your host. I'll see you next time.